That is it for me, so I'll pass things over to Peter to start today's presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining here today. Excited to share with you all, and maybe just kicking off, I'm going to have Rosemary share our first polling question, which is really just about helping me get a sense of kind of where you come to this training session from a background perspective, specifically in Energy Star benchmarking. And while she's doing that, yeah, you can see the polls up there. A little bit of my background, I've been working in some sort of support for facility services companies for a couple decades now. My last role before starting this consulting role, I actually worked for an energy management software company that was really geared towards providing a benchmarking service that incorporated Portfolio Manager. And so I come from that experience to kind of help you all think about how to do that, something similar with just Portfolio Manager as your benchmarking software application. So we'll give you a couple more minutes on that, or I should say seconds, on that poll question. But one thing, even before I jump into the details, I just want to give you an overview of what we'll talk about today. You know, some of you will know a lot about Energy Star, some may know very little. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of Energy Star, and I'm really going to gear it towards a service-focused mentality, so hopefully that will help you even if you know a lot about Energy Star. Then we're going to talk about the difference between a service and a project, because I think that helps really understand what a service looks like if you juxtaposition it to what a lot of people do in the industry, which is project-based benchmarking. And then we'll talk about how taking a service approach can align with a lot of company goals. And then we'll get pretty practical with some key steps and best practices for actually taking a benchmarking service to launch. And I should also mention that this training is geared towards providers, facility services providers, or in the Energy Star language we call service and product providers. Certainly you are welcome to stay on this training if you are not from that background. You certainly may get something out of it, but that is the specific group that I'll be speaking to here today. And with that, I guess, Rosemary, you can go ahead and wrap up our poll. And the one other introductory thing I will throw out there, just food for thought for you to be thinking about, is if you get to the end of this training and you think this is a perfect opportunity for me and my company to develop or to enhance a benchmarking service, we are offering the ability to be coached through some of those steps that I'll go through here today. So if that is of interest to you, then certainly let me know. You can opt in via the chat, or you can email me. My email will be up at the end of this presentation. And we'll start with an introductory consultation just to see if it's a good fit, and from there we may set up some ongoing sessions. Okay, so I've got your answer to the poll question, with the large majority being no. So that is great. You were in the right place then. For those of you that answered yes, I think it's maybe a third or so answered yes. Hopefully I can enhance whatever experiences you've had with benchmarking as a service. So we're going to start with this overview of Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This is kind of a summary of what the Portfolio Manager delivers, and that is a benchmark. And in many cases, that benchmark is a 1 to 100 score. As you can see here, a 50 is a national average. You're comparing your building to other like properties. So if you're a hospital, you're comparing yourself to all the hospitals in the country. And if you get a 50, you're right at average. And if you get a 75 or above, you're actually eligible to earn the Energy Star, and you can get the type of decal you see there for your building and it even recognizes those who are certified many years in a row. But the end goal is that it takes a lot of complex facility, or I shouldn't say complex, but it takes a lot of facility data and energy data and narrows it down to just one simple number that can be understood by all stakeholders. So in addition to delivering the score, a portfolio manager can also deliver an EUI, or an energy use intensity. This is really important for anyone who's thinking about developing a benchmarking service, because if you roll out a benchmarking service, you don't want to tell your salespeople or your customer success people, hey, we can only talk about this to A, B client, but not C client or D client. You know, it can't go on the website because we don't want certain people to know about it and call us, and then we can't do anything for them. You don't want to run into those types of situations. So the great thing about benchmarking with portfolio managers, it really does work with all buildings, and you can develop a service that works for all of your customers. Some will get your EUI, which includes weather normalization. Some will get a score, which also includes weather normalization, and a few other things, right? The score qualifies you for certification. It does do some normalization for different operating parameters in the building that you input. But then both of them are going to analyze your trends, and both are going to be a very effective tool for energy management. And as I jump to the next slide, you will see here that these are the buildings that do qualify for that score. You see many of the building types that you probably service are on here, and a handful of those will not be eligible for certification. But this training is really just to be at a high level, so I'm going to power on through that to a little bit more detail on what Portfolio Manager does. There are a lot of different energy software applications out there today. And I would say that Portfolio Manager is a really good introductory tool that is offered at no charge. So that's a really great place. It's a really great place to start, and can meet a lot of service providers' needs for a benchmarking service. So what you'll see here is it's really geared towards whole building energy and water consumption. There's a lot of great products out there that do maybe real-time or interval data. This is geared towards whole building. You can track green power purchases. There's a lot of reporting capabilities. Beyond energy and water, you're able to look at waste, GHG emissions. There's the ability to track your cost. Then custom reporting and the ability to apply for certification. So you get a lot out of this platform, and I'll even get into later how the Portfolio Manager through web services is integrated to a lot of other platforms that you might be familiar with. But this is going to be a very powerful tool for you to offer your customers and give them some valuable data on their energy performance. But it starts with collecting a number of pieces of information about the building. And this is really important as a service provider, because this is where a decent amount of work up front is required. Like with a lot of things, in order to achieve the result you want, there is some legwork that needs to be put in on the front end. And with benchmarking and Portfolio Manager, that's the data collection and input of getting a building first set up. And so if you know that as a service provider and you're offering a benchmarking service, you want to jump in and help at this stage. It is really important that you don't let this become a stumbling block for your customer who maybe at your initial meeting or after a training is very excited about benchmarking, but that all falls flat because they don't follow through collecting the information. But here is all that's needed. I've put it in a handful of different categories. The property information is pretty straightforward there. Where you really get into being able to support your clients from a service perspective is these property use details. The ones that I'm showing there are for offices. They're different for every different building type. When you think about those numbers for offices, they can change over time, and you want to keep those up to date. Another one that's important there is occupancy, and as we've seen with COVID, certainly occupancy can shift. So as a good benchmarking service provider, you want to stay on top of what those property use details are and making sure they're current for your clients. And then the big one is energy consumption. So you need at least 12 months of consumption for ideally all the different fuel types and water and waste as well. But really mainly energy and gas is what we'll talk about here today, or electricity and gas, I should say. And it requires at least 12 months, but ideally you get 12, even 36 months of data to see history. And cost is optional, but ideally you put in the cost as well. And so that can be a lot of data, right? And your customer may struggle with pulling that all together and getting it all input. So this is a great place for a service provider to jump in and provide support. And a lot of what I've gone over is available in much more detail and thoroughly in that Portfolio Manager data collection worksheet you see linked to at the bottom. So let's begin with the end in mind. So this is really where you want to get to with your clients, is some sort of report, some sort of deliverable to them that helps them understand their energy performance. This is one example. There are a number of different reports within Portfolio Manager that you can produce once you've completed benchmarking a building. I'm going to just zoom in so you can see in more detail the result that you will find in a typical building. The left side, this is broken down to the left side with progress, and the right side is a comparison to goals, performance goals. So this building, if you look at the very first row, has an Energy Star score of 30 in 2017. In 2019, it's up slightly. We've got some important goals for this company, right? It's for this building. We got a property target of 60, a national median. We're always comparing to the national median of 50, and then also a 75. So this would be a client that if you got started with, you could have some pretty interesting conversations just based off of this data. Certainly cost is always going to be a big one, so let's just jump to that and see. So if this building at its 31 in, again, ideally this would be a kind of a current score. We're pretending that this is kind of a current score for our purposes here today. But so the building that you're working with has a score of a 31, and you want to compare it to maybe just say the national average in this case. Maybe the goal of 60 seems a little bit far-fetched. So we'll say compared to the national average, how is this building going to perform? And on that cost basis there, you'll see that you've got a $120,000 annual energy cost gap, right? So this is a very kind of important data point to have in your conversations, because now the client can start to see, oh, you know, the investment that I'm potentially making in improving my facility with you as my service provider, there is certainly a significant payback. And you can do that type of comparison for the site EUI, the source EUI, any number of different metrics on here, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll come back to this report later as we get into more detail on kind of delivering your benchmarking service. Another quick thing to realize is up to this point we've been talking about Portfolio Manager, which delivers energy benchmarking results for commercial, government buildings, really any type of building that isn't an industrial building. Industrial buildings fall into a slightly different category for Energy Star, and I just want to touch on that because, again, if you are offering a benchmarking service as a service provider, you don't want to exclude certain classes of clients, right? So if you have, you know, maybe you have a lot of office properties, but you also have some industrial clients, here's where you would introduce them to Energy Star and Energy Star's Energy Performance Indicator. And their plants can get certified, and there's a whole section on the Energy Star website that talks about the industrial, what we call focus industries. But you see some of them listed there that can achieve this Energy Performance Indicator and be certified. So let's begin getting into the nuts and bolts of what benchmarking service is versus a one-time project, and hopefully this will help put into good perspective how a service can be beneficial. So in my experience, a typical approach to energy benchmarking is that it is with the goal to win a specific project, right? There's a building that's considering some sort of a retrofit or upgrade or some energy efficiency measure of some sort. And in order to position themselves to win that project, a service provider will want to benchmark that building and show the client those results. That is then used to support some sort of financial analysis or maybe justify completing an energy audit. But it's typically forgot about from that point on, right? It's a point-in-time snapshot, and even over the course of a long sales cycle, you know, some big projects have those year or even 2 or 3 year long sales cycles. I've seen those benchmark reports not even get updated. And so there's, you know, it is what it is. It works for some companies, and it's not to say that you can't get some value out of it. But it is kind of short-term focused, and it isn't, and you're missing an opportunity, I think, with the development of more of a long-term relationship. So let's talk about then what it might look like to take a service approach. The goal in your engagement with your client isn't just to get that project, although that may be how it starts. Your goal is really to set up yourself in an ongoing benchmarking relationship. And you are thinking about how you can position yourself as the trusted advisor to that client. And so when you get that benchmarking, when you get that building set up, while you may be focused on a specific project, you're talking to that client about how you're going to collect the data, how you're going to input that data, how you're going to do regular reports and generate and deliver those reports, and how you're going to do this using the functionality of Portfolio Manager, which allows you to share the account with them and both monitor that account and both be users of that information and really be partners. So, and in this scenario, what if you don't get the project, right? Are you still set up to maybe get the next one or the next one, or to be just in a better position to grow that relationship than maybe even the company that does the project? So that's what I think is more of the long-term focus in a service-oriented approach that Portfolio Manager can enable. So in the nitty-gritty of execution, here's what it looks like. On the project side, usually these things just sit in the hands of the sales team. I know that because I come from a background of sales. I've seen it, I've done it, and salespeople, if you leave it up to them, they tend to be more entrepreneurial. They tend to just kind of do what they think is going to work, and that can be great until you're trying to build a product that is repeatable and ongoing. But that salesperson is probably just going to capture some historical data. There's probably not any sort of formal arrangement, no formal scope of work with that client. But if you look at the ongoing execution, so this is where sales maybe makes the introduction to the concept of benchmarking, gets the client bought into doing it, but then it's quickly flipped to operations for more of the fulfillment of those benchmarking tasks and ongoing support. You have processes. I'll touch a little bit more on some of those. That ongoing utility data is captured by your operational team from either the utility or the client. And perhaps you have even a formal statement of work that the client has signed that defines their role and your role in delivering this ongoing benchmarking service. So here is what I would say are some of those kind of key processes, and we'll talk just in a little bit more detail about them, of a benchmarking service. So certainly the handoff from sales to operations is important, how that happens, what the salesperson has to collect, what exactly they have to get the customer to commit to or sign is all important, and how that gets handed off to operations makes a big difference in the customer's experience. Then your operations team is going to be tasked with onboarding a new building. That's capturing all that history and data and building attributes that we touched on. And again, that Portfolio Manager data collection worksheet is a great tool. And then I would encourage you to think about ongoing utility bill collection and entry as a separate process. Now, when you get started with your service, maybe the same person is doing both of those processes, and those processes actually are very familiar. But as you bring on a lot of different buildings and you're working with a lot of different utility companies, you will find that having a dedicated process for that ongoing utility bill data collection can be very important, because there are just some different things in terms of troubleshooting data with the client, getting data from the client or from the utility, and or keeping certain things up to date in Portfolio Manager. And you want to make sure you have processes in place there. And then finally, you want to deliver the customer something of a report. Maybe it's a consultation, but you do want to have a process for making sure on an ongoing basis you're not doing all this work without showing the actual value and making it visual and providing some feedback to the client. So with that, I'm going to have Rosemary, if you would launch that second poll question. Hopefully you have gotten a little bit more background on whether on benchmarking as a service versus a project. And so now I'm curious to learn as to where you would say your benchmarking projects tend to fall in that one or the other bucket. And while that poll is up, I will look at I'm going to get to, I see you guys are asking some questions, and I will come back to these at the end, but thank you. I don't think there's anything that I need to address right now. But yeah, let me just jump into these next couple slides, and we'll wrap up our poll. How do you improve your company results with a benchmarking service? I think the big one is client retention. You know, being sticky with your clients is going to always be important. And so more of a relationship-oriented investing in your clients with a benchmarking service that you know is an ongoing commitment on your part, but also provides ongoing value. And a big way that it provides ongoing value to both you and your client is that you learn more about that facility. Like with anything, anytime you spend more time on a given building benchmarking, perhaps looking at different projects, doing audits, you're going to help build that institutional knowledge of that facility. And you're also going to provide ongoing value with reporting. I have seen it many times where, you know, a building owner or manager will say that energy benchmarking and sustainability is important, but are they really looking at and measuring their results on an ongoing basis? And oftentimes that gets towards the bottom of the priority list very quickly. You will be able to stay top of mind with your clients. You know, if your marketing team has probably asked you for creative ways to do that many times, and this is a great one because you're back in front of your client potentially every month with updated results, new conversation points. And then, of course, with any client retention effort, you are going to be lowering your cost of sales. So if another way to think about achieving some of your company goals is most businesses are in some form or fashion trying to differentiate from their competition. And I would say if you have a benchmarking service, if you develop it, if you feel good about it, you can include an overview of that and a sample in your proposals. I think you will find that that will set you apart from many service providers that you are competing with. You are going to come to your clients just with a different perspective, right? You're not going to be just about getting their business for the one thing that they're maybe have an RFP out for or are talking to different service providers about. You're going to come with more of a long-term game plan around benchmarking that's going to show just a deeper concern for their long-term cost of operations. And then we'll get into this a little bit more with the functionality of Portfolio Manager, but there's some powerful tools around setting and tracking goals. And if you're able to position yourself as both a goal setting and tracking partner with your clients, then you're also obviously going to be in a very good position to help them achieve those goals. So Rosemary, you can wrap up that poll now. I think we should have gotten the results that we need. Okay, so a quite a wide variety of results here, but it seems like it's actually a pretty even spread. So good to know, and hopefully we'll continue to grow the number of you that are taking a service-oriented approach. And a great way to do that is to explain to you how you might go about creating a benchmarking service. So there's a lot to consider, and so not necessarily everything I touch on needs to be a part of or addressed by your benchmarking service. My goal here is just to go through some different ideas, get you thinking, and get you a decent list to start with. So one thing I will say is that when a lot of companies think about energy benchmarking, whether they realize it or not, there is a larger opportunity around energy services, and some of you may be already very clued in on that and very focused on it. As others of you, this may be a newer concept. But if you were going to offer energy services, there's a lot that can go into that. Whole building benchmarking is certainly a foundational point. Retro commissioning and looking at kind of the interactions of the systems in the building. You know, HVAC is obviously a big energy user. You've got your building controls, your lighting, and how do different utility incentives and utility support play into it. So there's a lot that goes into building out a full, well, what I call energy services offering. And you may be interested in providing all of those, maybe just some of them. You may not be interested in going in that direction at all. But one thing in common is that starting with Portfolio Manager is a great way to identify the energy services opportunity within your portfolio of clients, right? So getting a handful, maybe 20, maybe 50, maybe 100 buildings set up on Portfolio Manager is really going to help you understand, does your average client already have a score of an 80? Maybe you don't have the greatest opportunity to evolve those, although there certainly would be some. But on the other hand, if your average client has a score of a 20, maybe the opportunity is huge. So it's a great way to begin a potential journey towards energy services, and you can do that without a significant investment. As you can imagine, a lot of building out all of these key competencies could take years and a significant investment. So using Portfolio Manager to kind of start and feel out that journey and take kind of a service-based approach makes a lot of sense. Another thing you're going to want to think about is just developing your Portfolio Manager expertise. Certainly, no one wants to come to a training to be told to go to more trainings, but I will tell you that, and let me just put that request in context. If you are going to be offering an ongoing benchmarking service, you're really putting yourself out there as the expert, and you don't want to get these buildings set up and do something incorrect and lose your credibility as a service provider. So do your homework. Here are some trainings that I would recommend to really increase your expertise and set you up to be a qualified service provider of a benchmarking service. I will say all of these trainings are either already pre-recorded, some of them are offered live, many of them are also self-guided. So you've got lots of different options on our training website to increase your expertise on Portfolio Manager. And then I would say benchmark a building to get started. Your own office or the office that you're in is often an easy one to begin with, but just get your feet wet, right? You want to understand how to navigate Portfolio Manager, understand how to collect and input utility data, maybe generate some initial stories to share with your clients, and be able to produce some results via your reporting options. And then you're going to want to consider the utility data collection aspect of this. And I will tell you, this is a way to set yourself apart, because this is going to be one of your clients' biggest challenges, is getting complete and accurate utility data and keeping that data up to date. If you're in a deregulated state, you may have a little bit more of a challenge, although that's not a hard and fast rule. But you may have a variety of different utilities that you need to collect data from. Utilities may have a large, or may have different types of authorization forms, so getting familiar with those processes and those forms in your territory. You may need to capture some online access credentials. Some utilities will allow you to set up your own access and get your clients to give you permission to those buildings. In other cases, the best option you have is to ask your clients for their online access credentials. Not an ideal solution, but sometimes it's the only route to go. And then you will need to look at what utilities actually automate data into Portfolio Manager. So you will get a copy of these slides. That is a link, a hyperlink to a website showing which utilities around the country actually import data directly to Portfolio Manager. And so just kind of going through this and again, figuring out how you can consistently and accurately provide utility data is going to be an important aspect of your benchmarking service. And if you solve that challenge, just for the first handful of clients, figure it out, it can really be a high value add when you walk into a meeting with a prospect and say, here's what we've been able to do, here's how we approach this, here's how we make sure that you have an ongoing regular report on your facility's energy performance. And in that meeting, you may want to discuss with the client whether or not you're going to get utility data from them or from their utility company. So this is a key decision to make at some point in your journey to developing an energy benchmarking service. I would say in many cases, I recommend that you get that data from the utility company, but it doesn't certainly have to be that way. I think it depends on your business, it depends on your client base, but I will talk to both approaches and some of the benefits of getting the data from the utility company. You know, your client may only have limited history on record. They may not be great about saving all their utility bills, and the utility should have at least multiple years. Clients often have a lot of different things pulling on their time, and so getting them to actually get you utility bills can be a challenge. So if you're able to get a process set up with the utility and being able to consistently get that data from the utility versus having to bug your clients is important. The data you get from your clients may not be accurate. I have seen a lot of different keystroke errors and or just data interpretation errors. Utility bills can be pretty complex things with a lot of different conversions that might need to be made or just numbers that are hard to understand. So if you're getting that data directly from the utility versus maybe a spreadsheet that your client has typed up, you have control of that data accuracy. Your clients typically aren't going to have any sort of API set up for you to get that data directly to Portfolio Manager. As I mentioned earlier, if you're focused on getting data from utility companies, you may find that many of them will import that data directly to Portfolio Manager for you. And ultimately, I think what you will find is that if you can make it work and get data from a utility company on behalf of your clients consistently, it's going to be the best experience for them, right? You're not asking them for bills, and you just are kind of setting that service up to work seamlessly over time. So a big thing to kind of wrap your mind around is how are you going to price this service? And essentially, not only how you're going to price it, but how are you going to make money? Because those are actually two different questions. You can think about benchmarking as making money through a long-term investment in that relationship with your client. And so in that regard, you may not actually want to charge them for the service. It may be a complimentary service that you set up for your clients with the idea that you want to get to know their facility, you want to get to understand their goals, their needs, and position yourself as a trusted advisor. So in that scenario, you may not want to charge them for the service. But I will say it's still important to determine a price, because people do not value something that does not have a price assigned to it. So I would think about, based on the first few buildings that you set up and the time you spent and how long it's going to take you and how much time it's going to take you to support a client in benchmarking for a year, come up with a price. And that will help you indicate what the value is that you're providing to your client when and if you do make the service complimentary. So Just a quick example is our price for the service is typically, $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, $500. Anything, it's really going to be up to you. It's your service to price, but you can just say, but we're willing to provide it to you at no cost to help you set and track your energy cost goals. And so another part of just getting into the business decision around benchmarking is what are the potential costs and what are the returns? So your potential costs are typically going to be labor only. And that is a blessing when you first get started because you probably have a handful of people around your company who maybe have a few hours here and there that you can invest in figuring this out. It may become a larger expense as you grow your benchmarking service and have to actually add staff to support your benchmarking efforts. But at least initially, you should be able to feel out whether or not a benchmarking service is the right fit for your business and your clients based on just investing some time, maybe assigning a few hours a week to a few key people to spearhead your pilot efforts. You should be able to determine whether there's an opportunity to hire additional folks to support this effort. And the potential returns, I would think, will more than cover those labor costs because we're talking again about lower costs of sales from client retention. We are also talking about the development of new projects. And again, that may be a longer term thing because you're starting with benchmarking these buildings with the idea of you don't want to just know what the next project is, but you want to get to know that facility and think about holistically how do you help that client reach their goals. And then as you differentiate yourself, as you set yourself out as a company that's really providing a valuable service, your client may ask for that same service at other facilities. It's really a service that translates well from one facility to the next, and that can lead to additional opportunities. So what about water? I've spent a lot of time talking about energy performance benchmarking, and certainly water should not be overlooked. You can track and trend water use and cost in Portfolio Manager. There is a water efficiency rating for multifamily properties, but not for other properties. So you're usually, in most cases, you're just going to be tracking and trending your water use. The other thing that is different with energy than with water is if you are getting that data directly from utilities, you're really going to deal with a lot of small utilities, and some of them aren't as sophisticated from an online engagement perspective, and so it can just make capturing that data more challenging. I would encourage you to figure out if that is in fact the case in your given region, because certainly it can vary a lot across different utilities. And then the ultimate question is going to be, can you add value by tracking water? And so for some, I've certainly dealt with a lot of large HVAC contractors who also had a plumbing business, right? So yes, that's an easy one. Certainly we can add value by tracking water if that's the case. But that's a different question, a different answer for a lot of different companies. But I would encourage you to think about that question up front because it can be more difficult to capture and track water than just energy. So back to reporting, I showed this progress and goals report at the beginning of our session. And whether it's that report or some other type of report, you on an ongoing basis do want to make reporting a part of your benchmarking service. It really would be silly to do all that work and then not show the client the results of your benchmarking efforts. You can also export data from Portfolio Manager. So that's a custom reporting option that allows you to kind of pick and choose what you want. So you can get that data out in Excel, and maybe you can import it into a BI tool, or you can do your reporting in Excel either way. You may have other reports that you do for clients. I've certainly seen it where a service provider was doing a lot of different things for their client, and so they wanted to integrate all that into one quarterly facility overview report. That's a possibility as well. But think about the frequency of deliverables. Your monthly benchmarking results may be ideal for a big facility like a hospital where energy costs are high and they really need to be looking closely every month. For a smaller facility, maybe your frequency is quarterly. Maybe you email that report every single month, but you only sit down with the client and do a more time-intensive consultative meeting every 6 months. So there's lots of different options there, but think about the frequency of deliverables and how you are going to show those results to your clients. And I mentioned this earlier, but just a little more depth here on how you might outsource a benchmarking service. There are certainly many energy information services and analytics companies out in the marketplace that offer benchmarking services. So if you're looking at this and you're currently thinking, wow, this seems like a lot of work, our staff, we don't have that extra 5 or 10 hours a week or anybody that has that bandwidth to look into it, and I just can't see us hiring somebody else. Well, this might be the right option for you to go. Look for a benchmarking service company that can really support you. And I would say a couple of the key features is look to see if they will collect the utility bill data and input it for you. That's going to be a differentiator. Some of them are just software platforms and don't kind of have that services component. I would kind of evaluate whether or not you want that, and certainly put an emphasis on it if it's important to you. Measurement and verification, certainly Portfolio Manager can currently track changes over time, but there are more in-depth ways to look at and track M&V, and some of these software platforms are going to have that. And their custom reporting, I see a very wide variety in how well these types of software platforms do reporting. And when you're going to be doing a benchmarking service and providing that ongoing engagement with your client, reporting is going to be a key aspect of that. And a great way to track down these companies or these types of companies is they are on our Energy Star Web Services partner list. So these are companies that have integrated the Energy Star score through web services into their platforms and could be ideal candidates for you to outsource to. Another consideration as you are formulating your benchmarking services, what's going on in your local market. Certainly a big driver for you to develop this type of service could be a local mandatory benchmarking ordinance, or to a lesser extent even some voluntary benchmarking initiatives that have been, some of them have been very popular and widespread. But looking around your local market and understanding, is there an opportunity to tag complement these different laws and initiatives with my benchmarking service would be an important question to answer. And then local utility incentives can certainly drive engagement in a benchmarking program like this. Many of them are looking for their clients to do some sort of benchmarking and audit as a part of their program. So that may be a helpful thing to consider. I mentioned it earlier on the ROI slide, but you may reach a point when you have to think about making an investment in your operations teams to support benchmarking. Certainly you can start launching and even getting a significant amount of momentum with a benchmarking service with your current team of accounts and sales reps. But I think if that service is going to grow and you're going to support it properly, you have to think about some other potential roles that you'll want to hire around, perhaps an energy analyst that's doing a lot of the reporting, onboarding new clients, a data-focused person that's really just capturing and inputting all the utility data. Maybe an energy engineer is going to be one of your kind of sales engineer roles that's following up with clients whose benchmarking results are lagging or answering questions about benchmarking results. And then maybe you will eventually get to the point where you hire somebody who is your lead for your energy services group, where you're benchmarking a lot of buildings and managing a team around doing that, identifying those opportunities and capitalizing on them. So once you kind of thought through all these different decisions, it's great to kind of boil it down into a proposal or statement of work that you can put in front of clients. This will help them kind of understand what your service is. We have a template around this that you will get as a follow-up to this training that can be very helpful for getting you thinking about what can go into a proposal or statement of work. But ultimately, what that is going to help you do is set expectations, right? With benchmarking, there are certain things that your client has to do. They have to help you get access to the utility data. They have to help you collect some of the facility inputs, and getting them to sign off on doing that will maintain and be a great way for you to maintain some accountability for them, and also help them keep you accountable, right? Because you are going to be committing to certain deliverables in that document, and it just helps when we like to say, great senses make great neighbors. So that's a good way to set up the relationship for success. You may want to think about, as you launch this service, how to incentivize your sales team. You know, this might be different than a lot of things that they're incentivized around. Maybe your salespeople are focused on winning projects. Maybe they're focused on quarterly or monthly targets. How do you incentivize them to engage clients in a benchmarking relationship that might take a few months to set up and get going? It might take a few different consultations before you really get to know that facility and know that client. So the first project, you know, could be months away, it could be years away. How do you get a salesperson to really invest in benchmarking is an important question to answer. So with that, I'm going to have Rosemary launch our last poll, and this is just really around understanding if at this point in the training, do you see this as a valuable service for your company? And I think it's important to answer because we've talked a lot about ideas around what can go into a benchmarking service and what some of the opportunities can be. And you're going to need to be excited about that because the next part of this is about the work. And so we're going to talk about rolling up your sleeves and getting into actually launching a benchmarking service and what that might look like. So I would say a pilot is always a good place to start with many different initiatives. This one is no different. Start small and build from there. So I think 5 or so key clients in a core group of your team is a good place to start. Think about getting different types of buildings. I wouldn't start with, you know, 5 schools or 5 hospitals unless that's the only type of client you serve, but most of you probably serve a lot of different buildings. So think about getting different buildings, and if you work across different utility territories, perhaps getting different buildings in different utility territories, because understanding not only how those utilities provide data, but maybe how the incentives that there could be available to your clients would be important to understand in your pilot. And then expect that pilot to run 3 to 6 months. It's not an overnight thing. It can certainly take longer. I would say no less than 3 months, but you want to get some benchmarking results. You want to produce some reports. You want to have some meetings with your customers. You want to get to understand what your value proposition is and what your processes are, and then really start to get the kinks worked out before moving along. And that's where you'll, once that 3 to 6 months comes to an end, you can use those results and learnings to inform a full launch. Develop case studies, always important. I think sometimes people put too much emphasis on a formal case study. I think just 2 or 3 sentences that you can put in an email to a prospect to get their attention is sometimes sufficient. So coming up with a couple of blurbs maybe from your initial pilot is a great start. If you can do a full formal case study, that's better. Get feedback from those initial clients. Consider the level of effort. We talked about pricing earlier, and so your pilot can really inform your pricing. What was challenging about this for you and your team? How much time did it take? How do you want to price this for your clients? And then really also doing kind of a retrospective on the utility data collection, both getting that 12, 24, 36 months of history and ongoing bills. How did that go? How do you feel about being able to duplicate that process over and over again for a lot of different buildings? And now you're going to kind of launch from your core team to your larger internal team. I would say it's really important in terms of getting the bigger team on board to have that pilot results, have that core team really understanding the value and being able to present that to maybe the larger group, maybe your entire sales and customer support staff. You know, typically anyone who's kind of in a customer-facing role or some sort of relevant operations staff would be a part of this training. And yeah, you want to review a lot of the things that we've touched on today. What utility incentives are out there for your clients, the benchmarking ordinance and programs, initiatives in your region that you're going to be taking advantage of with this service, and then the different processes that you're putting in place to make sure you deliver a consistent result to your clients. And Rosemary, you can wrap up that poll now. I guess our time is up, so we should be able to share and see those results. Oh, good. So we have a real high result of people saying, yes, that's good to hear, and hopefully this work that I'm going through now isn't scaring you off. But yeah, so the next piece is to build your prospective client list. And there's I think some good questions on this slide to ask, to think about who would be your ideal clients. You know, are they considering a large project in the next year or so? Can you position yourself as their trusted advisor, using benchmarking to target some sort of initiative or project that they're working on or have in their future? And maybe you're doing this well in advance of them really ever putting that project on the street or putting out an RFP because you're taking a different approach with your benchmarking service. Do you have some sort of maintenance or facility contract that's up for renewal soon? I think, you know, if you really want to think about client retention, targeting those renewals, talking about this potentially complementary benchmarking service that'll be a part of their renewal should they choose to renew. Compliance with these state or local ordinances. Do you have any customers that need to comply or currently out of compliance? Certainly an underperforming building would be a great target, or any clients that have maybe had difficulty justifying improvements to their facilities. And then anyone that has a sustainability program and or energy goals. Don't assume that they have this figured out. I think sometimes that is an assumption. Or don't assume that they aren't looking for somebody because they've got a million initiatives they're chasing and they're tired of tracking down utility bills and updating them themselves and they want to outsource. And then here's just some different thoughts on launching this. Certainly, I think if you know, hosting some sort of event, whether it's via Zoom or in person, I think an event is a great way to launch. You can have potentially someone from the utility company come in and speak on their incentive programs. You can present your pilot results, maybe even have one of your pilot clients speak about their experience. You can approach any initial case studies that you've developed. You can work with local associations. Some of them are always looking for presenters and portfolio managers. A part of, you know, the National Energy Star program is a great thing to do an educational session around. And then you can leverage your Energy Star partnership. If you are not an Energy Star partner, you can join as a service provider. You benchmark 10 buildings, and you'll qualify to be a partner and use that logo or certify one building. And so then you have an Energy Star partnership logo and credentials to include in your benchmarking service launch. And then your launch follow-through. I think, you know, everyone gets excited at the launch, but make sure you have the processes in place to continue that launch. So think back that list of customers that we came up with using those questions. Customers that need to comply, customers that are renewing, customers that have projects. You know, you should have come up with, you know, a long list of clients. Well, make sure you track that, and don't just track that for the successes, track it for the learnings as well. You know, and share that feedback internally and have a kind of a space where your customer-facing team can talk about benchmarking, the good and the bad, and the progress and the setbacks. That'll be great information for your team to learn on and build from. And then make sure that anyone who attended or was involved in your event, that you use that as an opportunity, as a connection and a touch point to get back with them. Continue to do refresher trainings on your benchmarking service. This, as with anything, it can be in one ear and out the other if you're not doing kind of an ongoing refresher training type of continuing education for your team that's involved in this, particularly at the outset. And don't forget to continue developing those case studies. Just the first few that come out of your pilot will certainly help you get started, but the larger library you can produce, the better. Okay, so that is the conclusion there. I hope you got some good practical tips for launching a service in that last section there. I've got a few minutes here for questions. I will also just mention again at the outset, I talked about the potential for our coaching program. So if that's of interest to you in terms of some coaching around developing a benchmarking, energy benchmarking service with Portfolio Manager, email me or let us know via the chat.